She only translated 5 words in Italian. "The station is over there," that was all. But those 5 words changed her life. Because the man who heard them controlled half of New Jersey, and he had just found a reason to bring her into his world. Camille didn't know the woman was being followed. She didn't know who she's with or what it would mean when the man watching whispered, "She comes with us." And by the time she realized she was already part something bigger than her. Let me ask you something. Would you stop to help a stranger in Times Square? Would you speak a language no one else could hear? Even if the moment felt small. What if that kindness pulled you into a life you couldn't walk away from? Because Camille? She was just being decent, but decency in the wrong moment can feel like a declaration of war. Before we dive in, where are you watching from, and what kind of story do you want to see next? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in and don't let go, go ahead, hit subscribe. I have another powerful one coming tomorrow. Now, let's get into the story. Times Square at 3 p.m. was a circus of noise and neon, even in broad daylight. Camille Platt weaved through the crowd with her headphones in, coffee cooling in her hand, mentally translating the Italian cookbook manuscript she'd been working on all morning. Rosolare la cipolla fino a doratura. Sauté the onion until golden. Simple. Precise. Safe. Then she saw her. An elderly woman stood frozen near the TKTS booth, clutching a worn leather purse against her chest. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her floral dress looked like it belonged in a Sicilian village square, not the heart of Manhattan. She was turning in slow circles, eyes wide with panic, lips moving in silent prayer. The crowds flowed around her like water around a stone. No one stopped. No one even looked. Camille felt something tug at her chest. She'd been that lost once. Her first week in Florence during study abroad, standing in the Santa Maria Novella train station with tears streaming down her face, unable to find her host family. An old man had helped her then, spoke slowly, walked her 3 blocks to the right address. She pulled out her headphones and approached. "Signora," Camille said gently. "Vie tutto bene. Posso aiutarla?" The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes, dark and deep-set, locked onto Camille's face like she just heard the voice of God. "Oh, grazie a Dio," the woman gasped, gripping Camille's forearm with surprising strength. "Mi sono persa. Non capisco niente ca. Tutto è troppo grande, troppo rumoroso. Respiri, signora. Respiri," Camille soothed. "Where are you trying to go?" The woman fumbled in her purse, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper with an address in New Jersey scrawled in shaky handwriting. "La Stazione. I need the train station. Penn Station. My grandson, he told me to meet him there, but I got confused. I got off too early, I think, and now. Vie bene, vie bene. You're okay." Camille scanned the street, orienting herself. "Penn Station isn't far. Do you see that street there?" She pointed west, towards 7th Avenue. "La Stazione è quella lì. The station is over there. You walk straight down the street, maybe 10 minutes. Or I can help you get a taxi." "Say un angelo," the woman breathed, clutching Camille's hand. "An angel. What's your name?" "Camille. Camille Platt." "Lucia Pisano." The woman squeezed her fingers. "Grazie, grazie mille." Camille smiled. "Be careful, Signora Lucia. This city can be overwhelming." She watched the elderly woman shuffle toward 7th Avenue, then turned back toward her apartment in Hell's Kitchen, already forgetting the encounter. Just another New York moment. Another small kindness in a city that rarely stopped moving. She didn't notice the black Lincoln Town car idling across the street. She didn't see the man in the dark suit sitting in the back seat, watching through tinted windows. She didn't hear him lean forward and speak to his driver in perfect Italian. "Quella donna. Scopri chi è. Find out who she is." Inside the Lincoln, Adelio Pisano adjusted his cufflinks without taking his eyes off the young woman walking away. She moved with purpose but without urgency, head up, shoulders back, confident. Not a tourist. A New Yorker. But one who spoke his grandmother's dialect like she'd been born in Palermo. "Boss." The driver, Marco, glanced in the rearview mirror. Adelio watched Camille disappear into the crowd, then shifted his gaze to his grandmother, now safely making her way toward Penn Station. Nana Lucia had insisted on exploring the city alone this morning. Stubborn woman. She'd given her security detail the slip at the hotel, probably to prove she wasn't helpless. And she'd gotten lost within 20 minutes. He'd been driving to meet her when Marco spotted her in the square. Adelio was about to get out when the young woman approached. He'd paused, watched, listened to her speak Italian. Not textbook Italian, but real Italian, warm and musical, with the soft rhythm of someone who'd learned it with love, not just grammar. "La Stazione è quella lì. 5 words. But they meant something more than directions. His grandmother was still alive because strangers like this woman existed. People who stopped when others walked by. People who saw an old lady in distress and didn't check their phones or pretend not to notice. In Adelio's world, kindness was rare, and rare things were valuable. "Follow her," Adelio said quietly. "Don't approach. Just find out where she lives." Marco pulled into traffic, staying 3 cars behind Camille as she walked west on 42nd Street. Adelio took out his phone and made a call. "Vito, I need you to run a name for me. Camille Platt. Early 30s, brown hair, about 5'6". Lives somewhere in Midtown West. I want everything. Work history, social media, financials, associates. Everything." He ended the call and leaned back against the leather seat. Nana Lucia had told him about the woman's voice. How gentle it was. How she'd looked at her like she mattered. "Era come sentir la mia mama," his grandmother would say later that evening. It was like hearing my mother. Adelio didn't believe in fate. He believed in opportunity. And he believed in debts. Marco tailed Camille for 15 minutes before she entered a walk-up building on 48th Street between 9th and 10th. Old brick. Rent-controlled, probably. A freelancer's apartment. Adelio made note of the address. "Take me to Penn Station," he said. "Let's make sure Nana gets home." But as Marco drove, Adelio's mind stayed on the woman who'd stopped to help. In his world, people had 2 reasons for doing kind things. They were stupid, or they wanted something. He didn't think Camille Platt was stupid, which meant he needed to know what she wanted. Or better yet, what she could be convinced to want. By midnight, Vito had sent him a full dossier. Camille Platt. Freelance translator. Italian-English, some French. Studied abroad in Florence 7 years ago. Single. No criminal record. No debt. No connections to any of the families. Clean. Too clean. Adelio read through the file twice, then made a decision. He pulled out a blank business card, wrote down an address in Fort Lee, and told Marco, "Deliver this to her apartment tonight. Slip it under the door. And send her a text from a burner. Say, she told me you helped my grandmother today. We should talk." "Boss, you sure about this?" Adelio looked out the window at the glittering skyline. "She spoke to my grandmother like family. That means something. And in my world, when something means something, you don't let it walk away. Would you have stopped to help a lost stranger in Times Square? Or kept walking? Comment below." Camille felt it before she saw it. That prickling sensation on the back of her neck. The awareness of being watched. She'd felt it twice on the walk home. Once near 8th Avenue, again when she stopped at the corner deli for milk. Both times, she turned around to scan the street, but saw nothing unusual. Just the typical Manhattan chaos. Taxis. Delivery bikes. Tourists with maps. Still, the feeling lingered. By the time she climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, her heart was beating faster than the stairs warranted. "You're being paranoid," she told herself. Too many true crime podcasts. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and immediately felt the difference. Nothing looked disturbed, but the air felt occupied, like someone had been there recently. She stood frozen in the doorway, scanning her tiny studio. The kitchenette, the futon couch, the desk piled with manuscripts. Everything was exactly where she'd left it, except for the business card on the floor. It lay just inside the threshold, white and pristine against her scuffed hardwood. No name, no logo, just an address embossed in black. 2247 Palisade Avenue, Fort Lee, New Jersey. Camille picked it up with shaking fingers. The cardstock was expensive, heavy, textured. The kind of thing that cost more than her monthly coffee budget. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. She told me you helped my grandmother today. We should talk." Camille's breath caught. She read the message 3 times, her mind racing. The elderly woman. Lucia. This was about her. She typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone grateful. "The address is safe. Come tomorrow, 2 p.m. A car will pick you up at noon from your building." "How do you know where I live?" No response. Camille stared at her phone, then at the card, then at her door, which she'd definitely locked that morning. Someone had been inside her apartment. Had slipped this card under her door like a calling card. Like a summons. She should call the police. But what would she say? "A nice old lady's grandson wants to thank me. And I'm scared because the card stock is too expensive?" She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound in the building made her jump. Every car passing outside made her peek through the blinds. At 3 a.m., she finally gave in and Googled the address. Street View showed a gated estate. Massive. Manicured lawns. The kind of place that didn't show up on Zillow. At 11:55 a.m. the next day, Camille stood at her window, watching the street. At exactly noon, a black Lincoln Town car pulled up in front of her building. Her phone buzzed. "We're here." Camille grabbed her purse with trembling hands. This was insane. She should stay inside. Lock the door. Block the number. But curiosity was a dangerous thing. And maybe, just maybe, this was something good. A translation opportunity. A grateful family wanting to pay her for her time yesterday. Rich people did weird things. Maybe this was just eccentric gratitude. She walked downstairs and out into the autumn sunlight. The driver, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an earpiece, opened the back door without a word. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Camille hesitated at the curb. "I'd like to know who I'm meeting." The driver's expression didn't change. "Mr. Pisano, Mrs. Lucia's grandson. He wants to thank you personally." "Just a thank you," Camille told herself. "That's all this is." She got in the car. As they pulled away from the curb, Camille watched her building disappear in the side mirror. That uneasy feeling returned, stronger now. The sensation that she'd just made a choice she couldn't unmake. The driver didn't speak for the entire 40-minute ride. Camille watched Manhattan give way to the George Washington Bridge, then to the tree-lined streets of Fort Lee. Wealth here was quieter than in the city. No penthouses or doormen. Just sprawling properties hidden behind gates and hedges. When they finally stopped, it was in front of iron gates flanked by stone pillars. The gates opened automatically. The car rolled up a circular driveway to a villa that belonged in Tuscany, not New Jersey. Cream-colored stone. Arched windows. A fountain in the center of the drive. What kind of family is this? The driver opened her door. "This way, Miss Platt." He knew her name. She hadn't given it. Camille stepped out, her heels clicking on the stone. A woman in a dark suit, security, definitely, stood near the entrance, watching her with professional detachment. The front door opened before Camille could knock. And everything changed. The man standing in the doorway didn't look dangerous. That was the first lie. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline. High cheekbones. Eyes so dark they were almost black, with the kind of intensity that made you feel like he could see through skin and bones straight into your thoughts. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Camille's entire wardrobe. No tie. The top button of his white shirt was undone, the only concession to casualness in his otherwise immaculate appearance. He looked like old money and new power wrapped in Italian tailoring. "Miss Platt." His voice was smooth, controlled. "Thank you for coming." It wasn't really a question. It was a statement. Like her arrival had never been in doubt. "I didn't have much choice," Camille said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You sent a car." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Please, come in." He stepped aside, and Camille entered a foyer that belonged in a museum. Marble floors. A crystal chandelier. A staircase that curved up to the second floor like something from a period drama. "I'm Adelio Pisano," he said, closing the door behind her. The sound of it shutting felt final. "Lucia's grandson. The woman from Times Square." "Yes." He gestured toward a sitting room to the left. "She's resting upstairs. She wanted to thank you herself, but I thought we should talk first." Camille followed him into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. The furniture was expensive but comfortable. Lived in. Family photos lined the mantel, black and white portraits mixed with color snapshots. Lucia appeared in several, always smiling. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Adelio asked. "Coffee? Wine? Water is fine." He poured 2 glasses from a crystal decanter, handed her one, then sat in a leather chair across from her. He didn't drink. Just watched her with those unsettling eyes. "You helped my grandmother yesterday," he said. "In a city where thousands of people would have walked past her, you stopped. You spoke to her in her language. Made her feel safe. It wasn't a big deal. It was to her." His tone didn't change, but something in his posture sharpened. "And therefore it was to me. My grandmother is everything. The only family I have left who remembers who I was before I became who I am." Camille didn't know what to say to that. The statement hung in the air, loaded with meaning she couldn't quite parse. "I want to compensate you for your time," Adelio continued. "And I'd like to offer you a job." "A job? I do business internationally. Italy primarily. I need someone who speaks the language fluently, not just textbook Italian, but real Italian. Someone who understands the culture, the nuances." He leaned forward slightly. "Someone like you." Camille's grip tightened on her water glass. "What kind of business?" "Import-export. Real estate. Investments." Each word came out smooth, practiced. "Not quite a lie," but not quite the truth either. I'm a freelance translator. I work from home. I don't. I'll pay you double what you currently make. He named a figure that made Camille's breath catch. Annually. Plus benefits. Travel when necessary. You'd work primarily from here, or from my office in the city. It was too much money. Way too much for translation work. Which meant this wasn't just translation work. Why me? Camille asked. There are hundreds of translators in New York. Because my grandmother trusted you in 30 seconds. Adelio stood, walking to the window. His back was to her now, but she could see his reflection in the glass. That's rare. Trust, in my world, is currency. And you earned hers without trying. What world is that? He turned, and for the first time, she saw something flicker across his face. Not quite amusement. Not quite respect. Something in between. The kind where people don't ask questions they're not ready to hear answers to. Camille stood. I should go. You haven't given me an answer. The answer is no. Thank you for the offer, but... Camille. The way he said her name stopped her cold. Familiar. Possessive. You came here. You got in the car. You walked through my door. Do you know why? She didn't answer. Because you're curious. Because something in you recognized that yesterday wasn't just a coincidence. It was a door opening. He took a step closer. Not threatening. Just present. And now you come with us. The words weren't a request. They were a statement of fact. If someone offered you double your salary, but wouldn't say exactly what the job was, would you take it? Drop your answer below. That's not how job offers work, Camille said, finding her voice. You don't just tell someone they're coming with you. Adelio's expression didn't change. I'm not most employers. Clearly. She set down her water glass with more force than intended. I need time to think about it. Of course. He walked to a mahogany desk in the corner, pulled out a leather portfolio, and extracted a single sheet of paper. The contract. Read it. Consider it. Take all the time you need. He handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. His were warm, steady. Hers were trembling slightly. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. Translation services. Cultural consultation. Availability for travel. Confidentiality clause. The salary line made her stomach flip. It was more than double. It was almost triple what she made in a good year. What's the catch? Camille asked. No catch. Just loyalty. To what? To me. To my family. To the work we do. He tilted his head slightly. And discretion. What you see, what you hear, what you translate, it stays in the family. There was that word again. Family. The way he said it carried weight, like it meant something more than blood and Sunday dinners. I need a few days, Camille said. You'll say yes. Adelio's tone was matter-of-fact, almost bored. Because you already said yes the moment you spoke to her. That's not. You stopped for my grandmother when no one else would. That tells me everything I need to know about you. He moved closer, not invading her space, but making his presence impossible to ignore. You're loyal, compassionate, smart enough to learn Italian from immersion, not just textbooks. And you're here, in my home, when every instinct probably told you not to get in that car. Camille's mouth went dry. He'd read her perfectly. Those qualities are rare, Adelio continued. In my world, rare things are protected, cultivated, valued. He paused. You'll say yes because you're already wondering what this life could be. What it would feel like to be part of something bigger than freelance work and rent-controlled apartments. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. He pulled a business card from his pocket. This one with his name embossed in silver. My personal number. Call me when you're ready. Not if. When. The driver appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by telepathy. The car is ready, boss. Adelio gestured toward the foyer. Marco will take you home. Think about it, Camille. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait. As Camille walked to the door, she heard soft footsteps on the stairs. She turned to see Lucia descending, her face lighting up with recognition. Say two. The old woman rushed forward, taking Camille's hands. The angel from yesterday. Adelio told me you were here. Grazie, cara. Grazie mille. Prego, Signora Lucia, Camille said softly. I'm glad you're safe. Lucia squeezed her hands, then looked between Camille and her grandson. Something knowing passed across her weathered face. You'll come back, she said. Not a question. A certainty. I feel it. You'll come back to us. In the car, Camille stared at the contract and the business card. The numbers blurred as Manhattan came into view. She thought about her studio apartment, her student loans, the manuscript deadline she was 3 days behind on, the constant hustle, the uncertainty, the loneliness of freelance life. Adelio Pisano was offering her stability, money, purpose. But something in his eyes had told her the price would be more than labor. Her phone buzzed as the car pulled up to her building. Unknown number. Think fast. But think carefully. Some doors only open once. It wasn't signed, but she knew who'd sent it. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Everything looked normal. It took her 3 hours to notice the difference. The coffee mug she'd left on the counter that morning, Camille was certain she'd left it near the sink. Now it sat beside the stove. Her laptop, which she always closed, was open at a 45-degree angle. The throw pillow on her futon was on the left side instead of the right. Small things. Things she might have dismissed as memory playing tricks. Except for the smell. Cigarette smoke. Faint but distinct. Camille didn't smoke. None of her neighbors smoked. But someone had been in her apartment, recently, and they'd wanted her to know it. Her hands shook as she checked the windows. Locked. The door showed no signs of forced entry. Whoever had been here had a key or knew how to pick locks professionally. She grabbed her phone, started to dial 911, then stopped. What would she tell them? Someone moved my coffee mug? They'd think she was paranoid. Unstable. Unless this wasn't random. Unless this was connected to yesterday. To the old woman. To Adelio Pisano and his too generous job offer and his talk about loyalty and family and rare things being protected. Some doors only open once. Camille's blood turned cold. She called the number on Adelio's card. He answered on the first ring. Someone was in my apartment, she said without preamble. Silence. Then, are you hurt? No. Nothing stolen. But someone was here. They moved things. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone except my men. They'll be there in 15 minutes. Your men? How do you? 15 minutes, Camille. Stay on the phone with me. She should have hung up. Should have called the police. Should have run. But his voice was steady, commanding, safe. And she was terrified. Who would do this? She whispered. People who saw you get into my car today. People who make assumptions about anyone associated with me. His tone hardened. This is my fault. I should have anticipated this. What people? What assumptions? We'll discuss it when you're safe. For now, just breathe. You're okay. 12 minutes later, there was a knock at her door. Camille looked through the peephole to see Marco and another man. Younger, broader, with a scar above his eyebrow. Miss Platt, Marco said. Mr. Pisano sent us. We're going to secure your apartment and take you somewhere safe. They worked quickly, professionally. Checked every window, every lock, every corner. The younger one, introduced only as Vito, dusted for prints without being asked. He found them on the coffee mug, the laptop, the doorknob. Gloves, Vito said. Whoever this was, they're not amateurs. Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at Camille. Boss wants to talk to you. She took the phone. Adelio, pack a bag. Essentials only. You're staying at the estate until this is resolved. I can't just leave my home. Your home was compromised. They didn't take anything because they weren't there to steal. They were there to send a message. To me. Through you. His voice dropped. I won't let you become collateral damage in someone else's war. Pack your things, Camille. This isn't a request. You said I had time to think about the job. That was before they made you a target. Now you're under my protection whether you work for me or not. We can discuss employment later. Right now, we discuss survival. 40 minutes later, Camille sat in the back of the Lincoln with a duffel bag of clothes and her laptop, watching her building disappear in the rearview mirror. She'd said no to the job, but somehow, she'd said yes to everything else. When they arrived at the estate, Lucia was waiting in the foyer. She embraced Camille like family, murmuring soft Italian reassurances. Adelio stood in the doorway of his study, watching. You're safe here, he said. For as long as you need. Camille looked around the palatial foyer, at the armed men stationed discreetly near exits, at Lucia fussing over her bag, at Adelio with his unreadable eyes. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was part of the house now. Would you have stayed in your apartment and called the police, or accepted protection from someone you just met? Tell me in the comments. The guest room was larger than Camille's entire studio apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden. A 4-poster bed with linens that probably cost more than her monthly rent. An ensuite bathroom with marble counters and a clawfoot tub. It felt like a gilded cage. Camille sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching her duffel bag, trying to process the last 48 hours. 2 days ago, she'd been translating cookbook manuscripts. Now she was living in a New Jersey estate under the protection of a man who scared her almost as much as he intrigued her. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Kara. Lucia's voice, gentle through the door. May I come in? Camille opened the door to find the old woman holding a tray with tea and biscotti. You look like you need this, Lucia said, brushing past her and setting the tray on the nightstand. She sat in the upholstered chair by the window and patted the ottoman. Sit. Talk with me. Camille sat, accepting the teacup with shaking hands. I know this is frightening, Lucia said. My grandson, he moves like a storm. Fast. Decisive. He doesn't always explain. She sipped her tea. But he is protecting you. You must believe this. From what? He won't tell me who broke into my apartment or why. Lucia's expression darkened. There are families in this business. Old rivalries. Adilio's father made enemies before he died. Those enemies, they watch for weakness. A woman getting into Adilio's car? They wonder. They worry. They test. So this is about him, not me. It is always about him. Lucia set down her cup. Until it becomes about you. That is how this life works. You orbit the sun, and eventually you burn. The metaphor sent chills down Camille's spine. Then why did you tell him about me? Why bring me here at all? Lucia's eyes grew distant. Because when I heard you speak yesterday, Dio mio, it was like hearing my daughter's voice. Adilio's mother. She reached over and squeezed Camille's hand. She died when he was 17. Cancer. It took her fast. One day she was laughing in the kitchen, the next she was gone. Camille felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. He never cried. Not once. Just closed up, like a door slamming shut. Lucia's voice cracked. His father tried to reach him, but Adilio was already becoming stone. When his father died 5 years later, murdered, Adilio didn't flinch. He just took over. 22 years old and already hard as granite. Why are you telling me this? Because yesterday, when I told him about you, about your voice, your kindness, Cara, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Something I haven't seen in 15 years. Lucia leaned forward. You opened a door he thought he'd welded shut. That Italian you spoke, so warm, so real, it reminded him of his mother. Of home. Of the man he was before grief turned him into what he had to become. Camille shook her head. I can't be responsible for fixing him. I don't even know him. You don't have to fix him. You already changed him just by existing. Lucia's grip tightened. He trusts you. Do you understand what that means? In his world, trust is rarer than diamonds. More valuable than gold. Lucia, it means you'll never be free of us. Not entirely. The old woman's eyes were sad but certain. You helped an old lady in Times Square. That kindness? It bound you to this family. To him. Whether you take the job or not. Whether you stay or leave. You're part of the story now. Camille felt tears prick her eyes. That's not fair. La vita non è giusta, Cara. Life isn't fair. But it can still be beautiful. And my grandson, beneath all that stone, he is still capable of beautiful things. I've seen glimpses. In how he cares for me. How he protects what matters. She stood, smoothing her dress. Give him a chance. Give yourself a chance. You might surprise each other. After Lucia left, Camille sat in the darkening room, watching the sun set over the garden. She thought about Adilio's eyes. The intensity. The calculation. The brief, unguarded moment when his grandmother mentioned trust. She thought about his words. Rare things are protected. Cultivated, valued, and she thought about Lucia's warning, you'll never be free of us. Not entirely. The door she'd walked through wasn't in Times Square or at the estate entrance. It was the moment she'd opened her mouth and said, Signora, vi è tutto bene. Everything that came after was just gravity. 3 days passed in surreal domesticity. Camille worked on translations in a sunlit study. Lucia taught her how to make proper Sicilian pasta. Marco and Vito became familiar presences, polite, professional, always watching. Adilio was often absent. Business, Lucia said. But when he was home, he'd appear in doorways, watching Camille with that unreadable expression. They'd exchange pleasantries. Nothing more. She almost convinced herself this was normal. Then came the Thursday morning that shattered everything. Camille was in the kitchen, helping Lucia chop vegetables, when she heard raised voices from Adilio's study. Not quite yelling, but close. Tense. Angry. Stay here, Lucia said quietly, but Camille had already moved toward the hallway. Through the partially open door, she saw Adilio behind his desk. 3 men stood before him. 2 she didn't recognize, and 1 she did. Marco. A 4th man knelt on the floor between them. Young, maybe 30. Blood dripped from his nose onto Adilio's Persian rug. I told you, Adilio said, his voice deadly calm, that anyone who touches what's mine answers to me. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Mr. Pisano, I swear, I didn't know. the kneeling man stammered. You work for Castellano. You followed my car. You broke into an apartment you thought belonged to someone under my protection. Adelio stood, walking around the desk with predatory grace. Those are facts. What you knew or didn't know is irrelevant. Please, I was just following orders. Adelio's hand shot out, gripping the man's jaw. Then you tell Castellano this. The next person he sends near my family loses more than teeth. What happened next lasted 3 seconds. Marco moved. There was a sickening crack. The man on the floor screamed. Camille's hands flew to her mouth, stifling her own cry. Adelio's head snapped toward the door. His eyes locked on hers, dark, intense, and completely unsurprised. Take him to the gate, Adelio said quietly. Make sure Castellano gets the message clearly. The men dragged the injured man out through a side entrance. Adelio walked to the door where Camille stood frozen. You should be in the kitchen, he said. What was that? Her voice came out strangled. A conversation. That was you hurt him. I defended what's mine. He moved closer. That man helped coordinate the break-in at your apartment. He's lucky he's still breathing. Camille backed away. This is insane. I need to leave. I need to. Where? Adelio's tone didn't rise, but it hardened. Back to your apartment? Where they know you live. Where they've already proven they can get inside. He tilted his head. You think the police can protect you from people who do this professionally? You're a criminal. Yes. No denial. No justification. Just fact. And that's what protects my family. Including you. I'm not your family. You became my family the moment Castellano decided you were. He gestured toward the now empty study. That man wasn't a random burglar. He was sent to send me a message. To test my weaknesses. You, whether you want to be or not, are perceived as a weakness. Camille's legs felt weak. So what now? I'm just stuck here? A prisoner. Protected. Adelio's expression softened microscopically. There's a difference. You're free to leave whenever you want. But if you do, I can't guarantee your safety. And despite what you just saw, I don't want anything to happen to you. Why? Camille whispered. Why do you care? For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, because my grandmother was right. You're kind. In a world that's forgotten how to be. And he stopped, jaw tightening. I protect rare things. He walked past her, pausing at the threshold. Take the job or don't. Stay or leave. But know this, if you run, they'll see weakness. And weakness, in this world, is an invitation. Camille stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding. She should run. Should call the police. Should disappear to another city and never look back. But Lucia's words echoed. You'll never be free of us. Not entirely. And beneath the fear, beneath the moral horror, something else whispered. You're already too deep to swim back to shore. That night, Camille knocked on Adelio's study door. I'll take the job, she said. But I need to know everything. No more secrets. Adelio looked up from his paperwork, and for the first time, she saw something like respect in his eyes. Then sit, he said, and let me tell you about the family business. If you witnessed something violent, but were told it was for your protection, could you stay? Comment your honest answer. If this seems intense already, trust me, it gets deeper. What Camille uncovers next isn't just danger. It's the heart of a man who was never supposed to love again. Subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Adelio was methodical, clinical even. He explained the structure. The families, the territories, the unwritten rules that governed a world most people pretended didn't exist. Import businesses that were half legitimate, half laundering. Real estate deals sealed with handshakes that meant more than contracts. Protection that was both literal and euphemistic. He didn't glorify it. He didn't apologize for it either. My father built this, Adelio said, pouring them both whiskey as midnight approached. And when he was killed, I inherited not just the business, but the obligations. The people who depend on us. The families we protect. The enemies who destroy everything if they sensed weakness. Camille sat across from him, the leather-bound ledger he'd shown her still open on the desk. Numbers. Names. Transactions that looked legitimate until you understood the code. And me, she asked. Where do I fit in this? You translate. You facilitate communication with our Italian partners. You help me navigate cultural nuances that can make or break deals worth millions. He met her eyes. And you give me someone I can trust in a world where trust is the rarest commodity. You don't even know me. I know enough. He leaned back in his chair. You're loyal. You stopped for a stranger when thousands wouldn't. You accepted danger to yourself rather than abandon someone in need. That tells me everything about your character. You're romanticizing a moment of basic human decency. In my world, basic human decency is revolutionary. The words hung between them like smoke. Camille stood, pacing to the window. The gardens were dark except for strategic lighting along the paths. She could see the shadows of men patrolling the perimeter. I didn't ask for any of this, she said quietly. I just wanted to help an old woman find her way home. I know. Adelio's voice came from directly behind her. She hadn't heard him move. You didn't have to ask. You stepped in. And now I protect what matters. She turned to face him. They were inches apart. Close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. Close enough to smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. I don't want to be something you have to protect, she said. Too late. His gaze was intense, unwavering. You became that the moment Castellano's men touched your door. But it's not a burden, Camille. It's a choice I'm making. One I'll keep making. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached past her to adjust the curtain, a gesture that felt protective, possessive. His arm brushed hers, and she felt the heat of him through her sleeve. Because you remind me, he said finally, that not everything in this world has to be transactional. That some people still do things because they're right, not because they're profitable. His jaw tightened. My mother was like that. She saw the good in everything. Everyone. Even my father, who was, he stopped. She would have liked you. Camille's breath caught. Lucia's words echoed. You opened something he thought he'd buried. Adelio, the staff has been instructed to treat you as family, he continued, stepping back, rebuilding the professional distance. Your room is yours for as long as you need it. Your salary starts immediately, whether you've completed any work yet or not. Marco and Vito are at your disposal if you need anything, groceries, books, to visit your apartment with security. You're changing the subject. I'm establishing parameters. But something flickered in his eyes, vulnerability, quickly shuddered. You matter, Camille. I don't say it because I don't need to, but you do. And in this house, what matters to me is protected absolutely. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Get some rest. Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to our Italian contacts. Your real work begins then. After he left, Camille stood in the empty study, her reflection ghost-like in the darkened window. She'd taken the job, accepted the protection, crossed the line from innocent bystander to complicit participant. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't sure she wanted to go back. The attack came 11 days later, at 2:47 a.m. Camille woke to the sound of shattering glass and shouting, harsh, urgent Italian that her sleep-fogged brain struggled to process. Then her door flew open and Vito was there, gun drawn, face grim. Andiamo. Now. What's happening? Now, Miss Platt. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into the hallway. Lucia was already there in her nightgown, supported by another guard. The old woman's face was pale but composed. She'd lived through this before. They moved quickly through the house, past paintings and antiques that suddenly felt obscene in their luxury. More gunfire, close then far, then close again. Camille's heart hammered against her ribs. Vito led them to what looked like a linen closet. He pressed something on the back wall, and it swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Safe room, he said. Go. Don't come out until someone gives you the all-clear. Password is Famiglia. Anyone who doesn't say it, you don't open the door. Lucia took Camille's hand and pulled her down the stairs. The door sealed behind them with a hydraulic hiss. The safe room was surprisingly spacious, maybe 15 by 20 feet. Concrete walls, reinforced door, a table with water bottles and emergency supplies. And along one wall, a bank of security monitors showing feeds from around the property. Dio mio, Lucia breathed, sinking into a chair. Camille couldn't look away from the screens. 6 men in dark clothes had breached the south wall. Adelio's security had intercepted them in the garden. The footage was grainy, night vision green, but the violence was crystal clear. Muzzle flashes, bodies falling, the choreographed brutality of men who knew how to kill. Then she saw him. Adelio emerged from the house in his shirt sleeves, no vest, no visible weapon. He walked toward the firefight like he was strolling through the garden on a Sunday morning. No, Camille whispered. What is he doing? Marco appeared on another screen, handing Adelio something. A gun. Adelio took it without breaking stride. What happened next took maybe 40 seconds, but felt like hours. Adelio moved with brutal efficiency. No wasted motion. No hesitation. He flanked 2 intruders, dropped them before they knew he was there. Advanced on a third who fired wildly. Adelio didn't flinch, just closed the distance and ended it. The remaining attackers retreated. Adelio's men pursued. And then it was over. Silence filled the safe room except for Lucia's soft prayers in Italian. Camille stared at the screens, her hands shaking. She'd seen Adelio in suits, in casual clothes, in his study with ledgers and whiskey. But this was who he really was. A predator. A killer. Someone who could end lives with the same calm he used to discuss business deals. 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the safe room door. "Famiglia," came Adelio's voice. Lucia opened the door. Adelio stood in the doorway, shirt torn, blood on his collar. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. His hair was disheveled, face smudged with dirt and gunpowder residue. But his eyes were alert, scanning them both for injury. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Lucia shook her head. "Stiamo bene." His gaze shifted to Camille. "You." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The man on the screens and the man in the doorway were the same person, but her mind couldn't reconcile them. Adelio stepped into the room, and Lucia quietly slipped past him, giving them privacy. He sat heavily on the chair across from Camille, wincing slightly. That's when she saw the blood seeping through his shirt at the shoulder. "You're bleeding," she said. "Grazed. I've had worse." He looked exhausted. Not physically, something deeper. Like the weight of what he'd just done was settling on him slowly. "I'm sorry you had to see that. You could have died. But I didn't. You walked out there like you didn't care if..." Her voice cracked. "I cared." His eyes locked on hers. "I cared about making sure they didn't get to this room. To you. To my grandmother. That's what I cared about." Camille felt tears on her cheeks. "This is insane. All of this is insane." "I know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, suddenly looking more human than she'd ever seen him. "I told you. You're one of us now. This is what that means. The danger. The violence. The constant vigilance. This is the life. I don't want this life." "Then you shouldn't have stopped in Times Square. There was no cruelty in it. Just truth. But you did. And here we are." They sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. Finally, Camille stood and approached him. "Let me see your shoulder." "It's nothing. Let me see it." He unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the wound. A deep graze across his left shoulder, still bleeding sluggishly. She found the first aid kit, cleaned it with hands that shook only slightly. As she worked, Adelio watched her face. "You're not running," he said quietly. "I should be. But you're not." She met his eyes. "No, I'm not. After everything Camille has seen, would you still be there in that room? Or would this be your breaking point? Drop a comment." Camille finished bandaging his shoulder in silence. Her fingers lingered on his skin longer than necessary, warm, solid, proof he was alive. When she stepped back, Adelio caught her wrist gently. "Why aren't you running?" he asked. Not demanding, genuinely asking. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. Blood still smudged his cheekbone. His eyes held that exhaustion again, the weight of violence, of responsibility, of being the man everyone expected him to be. "I don't know," she whispered. It was the most honest thing she'd said since entering his world. The safe room suddenly felt smaller. The concrete walls pressed in. The adrenaline that had kept her numb during the attack was fading, leaving something raw and exposed in its wake. "You should be terrified of me," Adelio said. "After what you saw." "I am." She didn't pull away from his grip. "But I'm also..." She stopped, unsure how to articulate the chaos in her chest. "Also what?" "Tired," she said finally. "Tired of being afraid. Tired of not knowing what's real anymore. Tired of this world being all hard edges and violence and..." Her voice cracked. "I just want to know if anything can still feel soft." Understanding flickered in his eyes. Before she could second-guess, before logic could reassert itself, Camille leaned down and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his hand came up to cup the back of her head, and he kissed her back like a man who'd forgotten what this felt like. Like someone who'd buried this part of himself so deep he thought it was dead. It wasn't gentle. There was too much desperation for gentleness, hers to feel something other than fear, his to feel something other than the coldness he'd cultivated. His fingers tangled in her hair. Her hands gripped his uninjured shoulder. They kissed like people drowning, reaching for something solid in the chaos. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adelio's forehead rested against hers. "Camille," his voice was rough. "Don't," she said. "Don't analyze it. Don't tell me it's a mistake. Just," she closed her eyes. "Just let it be real for a minute." "It's real." His thumb traced her jawline. "Too real. That's the problem." She pulled back to look at him. "Why is that a problem?" "Because now I have something else to protect. Something that matters more than territory or business or any of it." His eyes were dark, intense. "And in my world, the The things that matter most are the things that get used against you. Then maybe we don't let them. She didn't know where the words came from, some reckless part of her that had woken up when she bandaged his wounds. Maybe we're just careful. Careful. A bitter smile touched his lips. I don't know how to be careful with you. I don't know how to do this halfway. Then don't. The words hung between them like a dare. Adelio stood slowly, wincing at the movement. He cupped her face with both hands, studying her like she was a text he was trying to translate. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back. Not to your old life. Not to pretending you're just an employee. You understand that. I haven't had my old life since the moment I said, La stazione è quella lì. Camille covered his hands with hers. I think we both know I crossed that line weeks ago. He kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense. Like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of her, the way she fit against him. When Marco knocked on the safe room door with the all clear, they separated. But something fundamental had shifted. The air between them was different now, charged, inevitable. This complicates everything, Adelio said, but he was almost smiling. Good, Camille replied. I'm tired of simple. The morning after the attack, Adelio held a meeting in his study. 8 men, his captains, soldiers, advisors. Men who'd been with his father, who'd sworn loyalty when Adelio took over at 22. Camille was there, seated in the corner with her laptop, ostensibly to translate a contract with their Sicilian partners. But she listened. To everything. Castellano's making moves, Marco said, spreading surveillance photos on the desk. Last night wasn't random. He's testing our defenses, looking for weak points. Then we hit him back, Vito argued. Hard. Make an example. That starts a war, another man, Tony, countered. We've got legitimate businesses now. A war brings attention. Federal attention. The argument escalated. Voices rose. Testosterone and old grudges filled the room. Adelio sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. He let them argue for 5 minutes before raising a hand. Instant silence. Camille, he said, not looking at her. Your thoughts? 8 heads swiveled. She felt their skepticism like a physical weight. Why would she? Tony started. I asked her. Adelio cut him off. Not you. Camille. She closed her laptop slowly, choosing her words carefully. Castellano wants you to retaliate. He's baiting you. If you hit back, you justify whatever escalation he's planning. You become the aggressor in the eyes of the other families. So we do nothing. Vito's tone was sharp. I didn't say that. Camille stood, moving to the table. The men shifted uncomfortably. Women didn't typically participate in these discussions. You respond, but not with violence. With pressure. Castellano has a shipping contract with that company in Palermo, right? The one we've been negotiating with. Adelio's eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? I translated the emails last week. She pulled up a document on her phone. Here. They're not happy with Castellano's terms. They're paying 15% over market rate because he's got leverage from an old family connection. But that connection? It's 3rd generation removed. Barely relevant now. What are you suggesting? Adelio leaned forward. Offer them a better deal. Undercut him by 10%. We can afford it. Our margins are higher because of the legitimate front companies. When the Palermo company switches to us, Castellano loses face and income. No violence. No war. Just business. The room was silent. Tony spoke first. That's actually smart. It's more than smart, Marco said, looking at Camille with new respect. It's surgical. We hurt him without giving him grounds to retaliate. Adelio's expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. Do it, he said. Marco, reach out to Palermo. Use Camille's translation for the proposal. Make it elegant. Professional. He glanced at her. Stay after. I want your input on the Romano situation. The men filed out, several nodding to Camille as they passed. A small acknowledgement that meant everything in this world. When they were alone, Adelio stood and walked to the window. You're not just translating anymore, he said. No. Camille joined him. Is that a problem? It's dangerous. The men respect you now, which means Castellano will see you as more than collateral. You become a legitimate target. I was already a target. Not like this. He turned to face her. This is different. This is you being part of the decision-making, part of the power structure. His jaw tightened. I should tell you to stop, to stay in your lane. But you won't. She knew him now, understood how his mind worked. Because you actually value my opinion, and because keeping me ignorant doesn't make me safer, it makes me vulnerable. You're learning. Something like approval warmed his voice. faster than I expected. Over the next weeks, it became routine. Camille sat in on meetings, offering insights that blended cultural understanding with strategic thinking. She translated not just words but intentions, reading between the lines of Italian business correspondence to identify opportunities and threats. Adilio listened to her more than he listened to men who'd been with him for years. She became his sounding board, his strategist, the voice of morality when decisions tipped toward darkness, and the voice of ruthlessness when mercy would be mistaken for weakness. "You're like a consigliera," Lucia said one evening, watching Camille and Adilio review contracts in the study. "But quieter, more dangerous." "I'm just translating," Camille protested. "Cara," Lucia patted her hand. "You're translating power. That's the most dangerous translation of all." The old woman was right. Camille had stopped being just the woman who helped a lost tourist. She'd become the woman who whispered in the king's ear. And in this world, that made her either indispensable or a target. Sometimes both. Would you take the seat at the table if it was offered? Even knowing it makes you a target? Tell me what you'd do. Love didn't arrive like it did in movies. No sweeping orchestras or declarations in the rain. Instead, it crept in through the cracks of their carefully constructed walls, slow and inevitable as water seeping through stone. It happened in the 3 a.m. meetings when Adilio would find her still awake, translating correspondence, and he'd bring her coffee made exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, heavy cream, without asking. It happened in the way his hand would find the small of her back when they walked through the estate, a touch so subtle the guards didn't notice, but she felt it burn through her clothes. It happened in the silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind where 2 people could exist in the same space without needing to fill it with words. Adilio would work on ledgers while Camille read Italian newspapers, translating headlines. Hours would pass. Neither would speak, but the room felt full. "This isn't normal," Camille said one night, 3 months after the attack. They were in his study, the city glittering beyond the windows. "What we're doing. Define normal." Adilio didn't look up from his papers. "People who are together, they go on dates. They meet each other's friends. Do you want that?" Now he looked at her. "Restaurants where we're exposed? Friends who ask questions we can't answer." "No." She closed her book. "But I want to know what this is. What we are." He set down his pen. "We're 2 people who found each other in a world that usually only takes. Who understand that safety is an illusion and trust is earned in blood and silence." He stood, crossing to where she sat. "We're 2 people who are falling, Camille. And we both know there's no soft landing." "Quicksand," she whispered. "What?" "It feels like quicksand. The more I struggle to understand it, the deeper I sink." She looked up at him. "And the terrifying part, I've stopped struggling." Adilio pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle despite their history of violence. "I love you," he said, the words clumsy in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "I don't know how to do it the right way. I don't know how to give you normal. But I love you in the only way I know how, completely dangerously, and without the option of walking away." Camille's breath caught. He'd never said it before. Neither had she. "I love you too," she said. "Even though I shouldn't. Even though this whole thing is insane. Especially because it's insane." He kissed her, and she tasted the truth of it. This love wasn't built on flowers and first dates. It was built on shared consequences. On late nights cleaning blood from shirts. On translations that meant life or death. On the moment she'd chosen to stay, when every rational part of her screamed to run. Their love was quicksand. But they were sinking together. The family noticed the shift. Marco started calling her Mrs. Pisano weeks before there was any official discussion of marriage. Lucia smiled knowingly whenever they entered a room together. Even Tony, the most traditional of Adilio's men, began deferring to her judgment in meetings. "They see it," Lucia said one afternoon, teaching Camille to make cannoli. "The way he looks at you. Like you're the only solid thing in a world of shifting sand." "Is that enough?" Camille asked. "In this life. Cara, in this life, it's everything." Lucia squeezed her hand. "My son married for power. It destroyed him and my daughter-in-law. But Adilio, he's marrying for love. That's either salvation or damnation. Time will tell which." That night, Adilio took Camille to the garden. The first time they'd been truly alone outside the house since the attack. Security watched from discreet distances. "I can't give you normal," he said, echoing his earlier words. "But I can give you this. Us. A life where you're not hidden or protected like a secret. Where you stand beside me as my equal." "Adilio." He pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. "Marry me. Not because it's expected. Not because you're already living here, but because when I look at the future, at every decision, every risk, every moment, you're in it. You're part of every calculation. That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard, Camille said, but she was crying. I'm a realist, not a romantic. He almost smiled. But I'm a realist who loves you. So, will you marry me and be part of this beautiful, terrible thing we're building? She looked at the ring, at his face, at the armed men pretending not to watch from the shadows. Yes, she said. God help me, yes. When he slid the ring onto her finger, it felt less like a promise and more like a seal. A contract written in something more binding than ink. The wedding was nothing like Camille had imagined as a little girl. No church filled with guests. No white dress with a train. No father walking her down an aisle. Instead, a judge came to the estate on a Saturday in October. The ceremony took place in the garden where Adelio had proposed, with exactly 7 witnesses. Lucia, Marco, Vito, Tony, and 3 of Adelio's most trusted associates. Camille wore a cream-colored dress, elegant, simple, expensive in the way truly wealthy people recognized. Adelio wore the same charcoal suit he'd worn the day they met, but with a tie this time. Concession to tradition. Lucia stood beside Camille, one weathered hand gripping hers tightly. The old woman had cried through the entire 10-minute ceremony. Happy tears, she insisted, but Camille wondered if there was grief mixed in. Grief for the granddaughter-in-law who would never have a normal life, who would always live with guards at the gate and violence as a possibility. Do you, Camille Marie Platt, take Adelio Vincent Pisano to be your lawfully wedded husband? She looked at Adelio. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her forget the witnesses, the guards, the guns concealed beneath suit jackets. I do, she said clearly. Not just I do to marriage. I do to the life, the danger, the moral complexity, the beautiful, terrible thing they built together. Do you, Adelio Vincent Pisano, take Camille Marie Platt to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation. Like the decision had been made months ago in a safe room while she bandaged his wounds. By the power vested in me by the state of New Jersey, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was brief, appropriate for the audience, but Camille felt the promise in it. The claim. Marco was the first to congratulate them, shaking Adelio's hand with genuine warmth. About time, boss. She's too good for you, but somehow you convinced her anyway. Don't remind me, Adelio replied, but he was smiling. The reception was equally understated. Dinner in the formal dining room. Lucia's cannoli for dessert. Champagne that probably cost more than Camille used to make in a month. Toasts that walked the line between celebration and business. Because even their wedding, was part of the family enterprise. To the new Mrs. Pisano, Tony raised his glass. May she continue to keep our boss honest and our enemies confused. Later, alone in what was now their bedroom instead of just Adelio's, Camille stood at the window, the ring heavy on her finger. Regrets? Adelio asked, loosening his tie. 1,000. She turned to face him. But not about this. About the woman I used to be. The one who thought helping a lost tourist was just a small kindness, not a life sentence. It's not a sentence. He crossed to her. It's a choice. One you make every day. You could still leave. No, I couldn't. She touched his face. That's what you don't understand. Or maybe you do. I couldn't leave you any more than I could stop breathing. Not because you won't let me. Because I don't want to. She laughed, the sound slightly bitter. I've become the thing I never thought I'd be. A woman who chose love over morality. You didn't abandon your morality. You just expanded it. He pulled her close. You're the reason we're transitioning more business to legitimate operations. Why I think twice before using violence. You're changing this family from the inside. Or the family is changing me. Both. He kissed her forehead. We're changing each other. That's what love does. Camille rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady. Sure. The heart of a man who'd killed to protect her. Who'd promised her a life of beautiful, terrible things. She was Camille Pisano now. Not just in the family. The family. And God help anyone who forgot it. If you had to choose between the safe, normal life you knew and a dangerous love that felt more real, which would you choose? Be honest in the comments. Mirinda arrived on a Tuesday in April, screaming her way into a world her parents were desperately trying to make gentler. Camille held her daughter for the first time in a private hospital room with guards outside the door, and felt something fundamental shift. This tiny, perfect thing, all wrinkled skin and dark hair like her father's, had no idea about the empire she'd been born into. The blood money that paid for her nursery. The violence that had paved the way for her existence. She'll never know this life, Camille whispered to Adelio, who stood beside the bed, his finger clutched in their daughter's impossibly small fist. Promise me. She grows up normal. Safe. Clean. Adelio's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd argue. But then he looked at Miranda, really looked at her, and something in his eyes softened. I promise, he said. He kept it. The transition took years. Slow, methodical, like turning a ship that had been sailing in one direction for generations. Adelio began divesting from the darker enterprises, the protection rackets, the under-the-table dealings, anything that couldn't survive scrutiny in daylight. He invested in real estate, legitimate imports, a restaurant in Manhattan that actually made money honestly, a vineyard in Napa that imported Italian grapes through proper channels. You're going soft, Tony said during one meeting, 3 years into the transition. I'm going smart, Adelio corrected. The old ways are dying. The families that don't adapt will be in prison or dead within a decade. I'm building something my daughter can inherit without shame. Camille sat beside him during these meetings now, not in the corner, but at the table. Mrs. Pisano, consigliera, the woman who'd helped architect the family's legitimization. Some of the old guard left. They couldn't stomach the slow pace, the abandonment of what they saw as tradition. But most stayed because Adelio had earned their loyalty and Camille had earned their respect. Marco became COO of Pisano Enterprises. Vito headed security, still armed, but now protecting corporate assets, not criminal ones. Even Tony found his place, managing the restaurant that became a family gathering spot where Miranda could run between tables without seeing anything she shouldn't. Lucia lived to see her great-granddaughter's 8th birthday. She died peacefully in her sleep, rosary beads clutched in her weathered hands. At the funeral, Camille stood beside Adelio as he delivered the eulogy. In Italian, the language his grandmother had spoken to him as a child, the language that had brought Camille into their lives. She taught me that family isn't just blood, Adelio said, his voice steady despite the grief. It's who you choose to protect, who you choose to become better for. His eyes found Camille's. She chose Camille for this family before I was smart enough to see it. As always, Nana knew first. After they buried her, Adelio announced his retirement. Not from the business. He'd still chair the board, still make strategic decisions, but from the day-to-day operations, from the meetings with families who still operated in shadows, from the world that had defined him since he was 22. I want to watch my daughter grow up, he told Camille that night. Not from surveillance feeds or between meetings. I want to actually be there, the way my father never was for me. Miranda grew up beautiful, brilliant, and blissfully ignorant. She knew her father owned businesses. She knew her mother worked with him. She knew they were wealthy, but not ostentatious. She didn't know about the guns hidden throughout the house, the men who still watched from discreet distances, the reason certain families never socialized with theirs despite living in the same circles. At 16, Miranda announced she wanted to be a veterinarian. Not a lawyer? Adelio asked. Not business. Animals don't lie, Dad. She grinned. And they don't need translation. Camille caught Adelio's eye across the dinner table and saw the same thing she felt, pride mixed with relief. Their daughter had chosen innocence, had chosen a life outside the family legacy. They'd succeeded. By the time Miranda graduated veterinary school and opened her own practice, the Pisano name meant legitimate business, philanthropic work, and that excellent Italian restaurant in Manhattan. The old world, the one of blood and territory and honor defended with violence, had faded into memory. Not entirely. Never entirely. There were still men who remembered. Still families who held grudges. Still moments when Adelio's hand would instinctively move toward where he used to carry a gun. But mostly they'd built something new. Something clean. Something their daughter could inherit without having to wash blood from her hands first. Emma was 22 when she found the box. Miranda's daughter had inherited her grandmother's curiosity and her grandfather's sharp mind. She was studying criminal justice at Columbia, writing her thesis on the ethics of rehabilitation versus punishment. She'd come to the estate, now run by a property management company, though Camille and Adelio still lived there, to dig through old family documents for a section on generational change. The box was in the back of a closet in what had been Adelio's old study, unmarked, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Emma opened it without thinking twice. Inside, surveillance photos from the 1990s and early 2000s. Court transcripts with the Pisano name redacted, but obviously present. FBI reports. Newspaper clippings about unsolved murders and suspected organized crime connections. And in the center, a dossier with her grandmother's face, younger, different, but unmistakably Camille. Labeled, subject, Camille Platt. Association, Adelio Pisano. Status, person of interest. Emma sat on the floor of the study for an hour, reading. Her hands shook as she turned pages that detailed a world she'd never imagined. Her grandfather, the quiet man who taught her Italian, who took her to the vineyard every summer, who cried at her high school graduation, described in these documents as a suspected organized crime boss. Her grandmother, the elegant woman who still translated for the family business, who'd taught her to speak 3 languages, who made the best cannoli, photographed entering and leaving locations under FBI surveillance. When Camille found her, Emma was still sitting on the floor, surrounded by evidence of a life she'd never known existed. Emma, Camille's voice was quiet, carefully controlled. Is this who you were? Emma held up a photo, Camille at 28, getting into a car with armed men visible in the background. Camille lowered herself onto the floor beside her granddaughter, her joints protesting the movement. She was 70 now, still sharp but showing the weight of years. No, Camille said finally. It's who I became. That's not an answer, Grandma. It's the only honest one I have. Camille picked up one of the surveillance photos. I was a translator, a freelancer. I helped a lost old woman in Times Square, your great-great-grandmother Lucia. And that single act of kindness pulled me into a world I never chose but couldn't escape. You could have left. You could have. Gone where? Camille's voice was gentle but firm. Once they knew I existed, once I'd seen what I'd seen, leaving would have made me either a witness or a liability. Your grandfather protected me. And somewhere in that protection, I fell in love with him. And somewhere in that love, I became part of what he was building. Emma gestured at the documents. Building? This is crime. Violence. Murder. It was. Camille met her granddaughter's eyes. And then we changed it. Not overnight. Not easily. But we did. Your grandfather walked away from that world so your mother could grow up clean. So you could sit in Columbia studying ethics without ever having to compromise yours. By compromising yours? Yes. No hesitation. I made choices, Emma. Some I'm proud of. Some I'm not. But all of them led to you. To your mother's practice. To a family that operates in daylight now. Was it worth it? She paused. Ask me on different days, you'll get different answers. Emma was crying now. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm still me. Just more complicated than you thought. Camille squeezed her hand. Your grandfather and I, we built something beautiful out of something dark. That's our legacy. Not the darkness we came from, but the light we fought toward. Emma spent 3 days reading through everything. Then she changed her thesis topic. 6 months later, she presented her paper. Redemption and Legacy, a case study in generational moral evolution. She never used the family name, but everyone who knew. Camille and Adelio sat in the audience, holding hands, as their granddaughter presented an ethical analysis of their lives. The choices they'd made, the prices they'd paid, the world they'd left behind. Transformation isn't binary, Emma concluded. It's not bad to good, wrong to right. It's complicated people making complicated choices in impossible circumstances, trying to build something better for the next generation. That's not redemption. It's just human. Afterward, Emma hugged them both. I still don't understand all of it, she said. But I understand you tried. And that has to count for something. It's all we have, Adelio said quietly. Our trying. Adelio died at 78, on a clear Sunday morning in October. No violence. No drama. Just time, finally catching up to a man who'd outrun it for decades. He'd woken early, as always. Made coffee, as always. Sat in the garden where he'd proposed to Camille 43 years earlier. She found him there an hour later, slumped in his chair, a faint smile on his lips like he'd seen something beautiful in those final moments. The funeral was massive. 300 people packed into the cathedral. Legitimate business partners. Old family members who'd survived the transition. Employees from the restaurant, the vineyard, the real estate holdings. And a handful of old men in the back who'd known Adelio in the before times, paying respects to a king who'd walked away from his throne. Mirinda spoke first, her voice breaking as she talked about the father who'd taught her to never settle, to build rather than destroy, to know when to fight and when to walk away. Emma spoke next, reading from her thesis, framing her grandfather as a case study in human complexity. Neither hero nor villain, but a man who'd chosen transformation over stagnation. Camille couldn't speak at the funeral. Her throat closed every time she tried. Instead, she waited until everyone left. Until it was just her and Marco and Vito, standing at the graveside as the sun set. He loved you, Marco said quietly. The old soldier had tears in his eyes. More than the business. More than the power. More than anything. I know. Camille's voice was hoarse from crying. After they left, she stood alone at the grave. Adelio Vincent Pisano, beloved husband, father, grandfather. 1947 to 2025. No mention of what he'd been, only what he'd loved. Camille knelt at the grave, her knees protesting but holding. She placed her hand on the cold marble and spoke in Italian, the language that had started everything. La stazione è quella lì, she whispered. The station is over there. The same words she'd said to a lost old woman in Times Square 50 years ago. The words that had opened a door to a life she never imagined. The words that had led her to love and danger and transformation. The journey is finished, amore mio, she continued in Italian. The train has arrived. You carried us all so far, from darkness into light, from fear into love, from violence into peace. You did it. We did it together. She stood slowly, joints aching, and looked out over the cemetery. Lucia was buried 20 feet away. Marco and Vito would eventually join them. The old world, slowly being laid to rest. But their family continued. Miranda's veterinary practice thrived. Emma was considering law school, thinking about prosecution versus defense, about justice versus mercy. The same questions Camille had wrestled with for decades. The Pisano legacy wasn't in the old world Adelio had inherited. It was in the new world they'd built, complicated, imperfect, but clean enough that future generations could stand in daylight. As Camille walked back to her car, she thought about that moment in Times Square. The choice to stop, to help, to speak Italian to a frightened old woman. One act of kindness had bound her to a family, to a man, to a life of beautiful, terrible complexity. And given the choice again, knowing everything, every danger, every moral compromise, every moment of fear and love, she'd still stop. She'd still speak those words. La stazione è quella lì. Because some journeys are worth taking, even when you don't know the destination. Even when the train leads somewhere you never meant to go. Sometimes one act of kindness doesn't save you, it binds you. Camille didn't change the world. She entered one, and somehow helped change its ending.
Thanks so much for watching till the end. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's coming next. It's even more surprising and emotional than this one. Go ahead and click the story on your screen right now, and see you in the next story.